Old school gaming. I thought I'd give some comments about original Dungeons and Dragons. In 1974, they released the original Dungeons and Dragons. That was the first three books that defines three classes: fighting men, magic users, and clerics. There were the races they talked about: dwarves, elves, hobbits. Later they changed hobbit to halfling to avoid licensing issues. There were other there's a phrase about other character types. One of the quotes, quoting from the book, it says, "There is no reason that a player cannot be allowed to play as virtually anything, provided they begin relatively weak and work up to the top. For example, a player wishing to be a Balrog would have to begin as, say, a young one and progress upward in the usual manner, steps being predetermined by the campaign referee." One of the things that I did was I played as a shadow. And we worked out that it was a relatively weak character to start with, but it could feed by touching. When it touched something, it would draw some of its hit points away, which is how shadows fed. I totally messed up Dungeon Master by that because he was not prepared for a weak character who could slide under a door and attack something. Levels. There is no theoretical limit to how high a character may progress. For example, a 20th level Lord or 20th level Wizard, etc. A Lord was what they was the hot level. They gave the names to each level of the character, fighting men, and same thing with magic users and clerics. Experience. You received experience from killing monsters and gaining treasure. And this is one of the big differences between 3rd, 4th, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and original Dungeons and Dragons. In the original Dungeons and Dragons, 1 gold piece equals 1 experience points. No exception. If you stole from an innkeeper 10 gold pieces, you got 10 experience points for it. If you stole a magical dagger from some magic user, experience was awarded on based upon the value of the dagger. So you would convert the dagger, or look up and determine how many gold pieces was the value of the dagger, and that's how many experience points you got. To roll your stats, your strength, intelligence, constitution, charisma, dexterity, you rolled 3d6. You listed out your stats. You rolled 3d6, no pluses, no minuses, no adjustments, no rearrangement. It was just 3d6. Hit points weren't clearly defined, except that they were basically 1d6 per level in the first 3 books, in the original books. Healing. If you got hit, you took points, damage against your hit points. When you reached 0, you died. There were 3 ways to heal. Clerical spells could heal you, cure minor wounds. However, clerics didn't get any spells until 2nd level. So a cleric came out on the 1st level and was basically another fighter until he got to 2nd level, where he could cast a single cure light wounds in a day. Potions were the other way, so you tended to try and find potions of healing or buy or steal potions of healing. Interesting quote from the original books: "On the first day of complete rest, no hit points will be regained, but every day thereafter, 1 hit point will be regained until the character is completely healed. This can take a long time. So if you're down 20 hit points, it would take you 21 days to get back to fully healed." There were 3 alignments: law, chaos, and neutrality. And it was more about order versus disorder. In 1975, Greyhawk Supplement 1 was released. That introduced two new character classes, thieves and paladins. Paladins must be lawful, was the statement, but it implied there was only an implication that that paladins had to be good. There was a lot of controversy about the concept of an anti-paladin, where he would go around and kill things, but there were other things like that. Greyhawk introduced the concept of evil, and interesting quote from Greyhawk. It says, "Evil monsters are as likely to turn on their supposed confederates in order to have all the loot as they are to attack a lawful party in the first place. While there is no rule to apply to groups of chaotic players operating in concert, referees are urged to formulate some rules against continuing cooperation as fits their particular situation, but consideration for concerted actions against chaotic players by lawful ones should be given." This was the first part where Dungeons & Dragons started introducing a little bit of preaching, where you should be good and you shouldn't be evil. And that prior to this, there wasn't there. That wasn't part of the game. Greyhawk also added the half-elf rate as a race, and it changed the hit points significantly. Fighting men got 1d8 per level with a maximum of 9 dice. Clerics got 1d6 per level with a maximum of 8 dice. Magic users and thieves only got a d4. Magic users with a max of 11 and thieves with a max of 10. So you could start with a first level party where your magic user had a single hit point. Also in 1975, Blackmoor was released, which was Supplement 2. That introduced two other character classes, which was monks and assassins. Monks had a maximum level of 16. This was one of the first character classes that started putting restrictions on how high you could go up. And there was only one monk at each level above 6. So you only had one 7th level monk in a world. One 8th level monk, and you had to fight the monk at that level to go up. It was interesting. Assassins. Interesting quote. "Assassins are always neutral. They're neither lawful nor chaotic, but they're always neutral. They had a maximum level of 13. There is one assassin each locale can have a title of Guide Master of Assassins." So it's sort of like level 14, but no additional hit points. Blackmoor also included the Temple of the Frog, which is a fascinating public adventure that was included there. Shows how interesting the first adventures defined by Arneson were laid out. The Temple of the Frog, I've tried using some of the ideas from Temple of the Frog in 4th edition, and they don't work very well in 4e because they're not based upon grids. They're not based upon, there's an example that I always run into was that there is a single room. It's a 5x5 room in the Temple of the Frog that has 25 skeletons. And that totally screws up all the features about combat advantage and everything when you try and play that in 4e and even 3e. So hit points, monks had 1d4 per level with a maximum of 16. Assassins had 1d6 per level with a maximum of 13. Blackmoor also included the hit location tables, which were extremely complicated based upon the creature type, and we rolled to hit them. I think I'm one of the few people who actually ever tried to use that. It's very complicated, extremely deadly, but it slows combat down, which was the biggest complaint about it, which is, in hindsight, combat in original Dungeons & Dragons much faster and much more deadly than in later editions. Eldritch Wizardry was Supplement 3. And that was released in 1976. And I remember when I got my copy of that in the mail. And it introduced druids with the maximum level of 13. This one puts restrictions also similar to the way we had with monks and with assassins, that you could have a maximum of 4 11th level druids, a maximum of 2 12th level druids, and a maximum of 1 13th level druid. It added the concept of good, but it was only as a footnote that certain creatures were good. Up to this point in time, you didn't even have the concept of good. Druids got 1d6 per level, a maximum of 13. Eldritch wizardry was provocative. Do a Google search for Eldritch wizardry and you'll see some of the images and you'll find why it was provocative. It's a scantily clad or naked woman on an altar. It introduced psionics and demons. Some notable features about the original Dungeons and Dragons. And it was gold equals experience. I can't emphasize that enough, because players generally receive more experience from treasure than from killing. It also made adventures in cities and towns much more interesting, because you go out and you have to do something. And if you had a quest where you just had to take something from point A to point B, your experience points was based upon how much you were paid for that. If you killed a monster, you got experience points for it, but it was the treasure that the monster had was also the experience. So a orc holding a 100 gold piece ring was worth probably around 108 gold pieces, 108 experience points. Lawful versus chaos was the battle sort of implied throughout the games without the connotation of good and evil. But it meant that most players tended toward chaos. You killed monsters and you took their treasure. Treasure was highly important. But because everything was based upon gold and how much gold you acquired, player versus player was very common. Thieves you always were worrisome about having a thief in the party, because would he pickpocket or steal things from everybody else in the party? A thief pickpockets the magic user and takes things. The assassin would be disguised as a thief, because assassins also had the ability that they were masters of disguise. So they would pose as a thief, join the party, and then poison and kill the entire party and take everything that they had. So a short walk down memory lane, one of the fascinating adventures that I ran when I was a dungeon master running original Dungeons and Dragons. The party was approached to save a village from a dragon. A dragon was terrorizing the village, and the party comes up and they see there's the footprints of the dragon outside, and certain things are burnt, and the party does just peripheral searching, very minimal. They think there's a dragon, and the town tells them that they've been terrorized, that the dragon comes up at night and terrorizes the town and has burned a few things, and so it keeps demanding more and more gold and sheep and various things like that. But it isn't a dragon. What it was 2 trolls with a staff of fireball. And they pose as a dragon. They've even got big cutout wooden feet that look like dragon feet footprints that they go and put stamp on the ground, on the muddy ground, to make footprints looking like a dragon. And to an inexperienced party, or a party that isn't paying too much attention, they wouldn't really even notice this. So the party knows a little bit about dragons. They know that one of the rules was that dragons can only breathe fire 3 times a day. Period. That's a limitation of a dragon. He can only use his breath weapon 3 times in a day. So the party plans a detailed plan how they're going to try and get the dragon to breathe, where they can duck behind cover and save, and various things like that. So they go out and they tempt that they wait for the dragon. They set up a caravan that they expect the dragon will attack, and the dragon comes. Quote, the dragon comes up, and they hear it stomping closer closer and closer, and they hear the bellowing sound that somebody wants the party to give them all their treasure, and they can, the caravan is torched, and the second blast of fire, and then there's a third blast of fire, and now the party decides to attack. They were not going to attack until after the dragon had breathed all its breath attack, so that they knew that they would be there. So they charge in at the where they think the dragon is, and the fourth fireball engulfs them, and they go, but a dragon can only breathe 3 times in one day. And I said, who said it was a dragon breath? It's a fireball. And anyway, the party managed to kill the trolls, but in the melee, they set part of the town on fire, and the town sort of decides to deduct some of the cost of the damage from the reward they promised, and the party is unhappy because they don't have as much treasure as they expected. So they grab the staff of fireball, and they burn the town down and kill and slaughter the entire town, because they were unhappy. And so they slaughter the town and they kill all the people, and they actually get a lot of experience points for killing an entire town. They leave no survivors. They gather up all the treasure and gold and silver from the town, but they offed the entire town. And that was sort of common. You'd run into people, he says, that they were, you didn't towns hear about adventurers killing people, and so they may not be really welcome walking into town. Something else that was happening with original Dungeons and Dragons, which not many people talked about, I haven't heard many other people, it was very, very underground. Maybe it was just the groups that I was dealing with. It's called Cash Dungeons and Dragons. They produced a price list for what each magic item would cost, what each stat point would cost. If you want an 18 strength, it would cost you X number. It cost you this much. And if you wanted a 17 strength, it would cost you this much, and so on. And you would pony up enough money. This would go into a pot. The dungeon masters would take a percentage. Normally 20 to 25% of the pot went to the dungeon masters for running the game, and the rest of the pot would go to the winner, and the winner was the one who got out with the most treasure. So it was sort of like, it was a form of gambling, which is probably why I was a little bit underground. These games would go on for many, many hours, because it was last man standing. So you'd go in there. Party would immediately start and split up everywhere, because no one wanted to be next to anyone else, because they would kill them just to make sure to get any treasure that they possibly had. I also had the advantage that early in the career I ran at some early science fiction conventions. I ran some tournament dungeons. Somewhere I have one of the trophies that were left over. I actually bought trophies for who would win, and there was one that was not awarded because the game got canceled for various reasons, and I've got the trophy around someplace. It was a lot of fun. I truly enjoyed original Dungeons and Dragons, but it's very different from the games we see today. So thank you for listening.